Hello and welcome to Kerbal Space Program. Today we're just, I'm starting a new series. We're just getting contracts here. The end goal of this is to get a colony in every planetary system. But for now we're just working through the career mode, getting the money. So we're just going to start by getting a basic crew report out. That crew report will then allow us to get a bit of science and some money and start up something. Get our basic tech nodes. We're using a lot of mods here. I'll have a full mod list in the description. But the main mods are the USI suite, most notably the MKS system, modular colonization, and we're also going to be using near future technologies a lot for our late game propulsion and energy generation. So we're just grabbing some EVA reports to get enough science to get the 2 starting tech nodes in the community tech tree. The tech tree is fairly large. There are a lot of nodes that won't be used, especially later on. So we're just going to stick with the ones that we actually need, but it'll last a while, that's for sure. We also have Outer Planets mods, so lots more to do. And we're going to get little ribbons as we go. So now, as you can see, we have two tech nodes we can start with, and we're going to get both of them because we have the technology. I'm actually recording this commentary in post, mostly because of construction work, making it difficult to record video and audio at the same time. But at this point, I didn't quite realize that I could get both. But yes, both are available, and I end up getting both of them, and therefore getting a lot of science parts. So just taking a quick look at the other nodes, and there's lots of life support stuff. We aren't using USI life support. I decided to use TAC life support instead of USI, but it's close enough anyways, it'll do the trick. Grabbing a new contract because we gathered the scientific data, and now to build the first rocket that will probably go to space. It's just, of course, a parachute, since this one's actually taking off. And I'm using the larger fuel tanks and just going to use a basic engine. It works well enough for what it needs to do. Unfortunately, I end up discovering later that this design is incredibly flawed. And I don't know why I put a heat shield there. Yeah, alright then. So at this point we only have the LVT-30, the Reliant, but I decided to put on an SRB to try and get enough to get into space. Of course, having played this only a bit beforehand, I didn't remember that this was a horrible idea. So I stick some basic fins on the bottom thinking it'll probably help. Hint, it doesn't. So this spacecraft is pretty much prepared to launch, and then soon I'll actually launch it, rather than looking at robotics parts. So of course I have a habit of launching craft and forgetting to make a minor change that is entirely important, so I'm actually going through everything, making sure I have everything. The thing is, I actually forgot something fairly important, which is I forgot to set a thrust limiter on the SRB. So it's going to be very inefficient and probably lead to my death. And, you know, you can't use question marks in names for some reason, so I'll just type it out. Now we're going to launch, and it's not the smoothest of launches. I promise I'm better than this normally, but barely anything to work off of. Unlike my usual playthroughs, I'm actually going to leave far aerodynamic failures on, because typically I can just get away with crazy things by turning them off. That just seems unfair. So I'm going to leave in everything, including mistakes. I'll cut out a few small things that, like, people don't need to see, like tiny amounts of science done at the KSC. So yes, this is going alright. We're getting a lot of speed records and height records, so that's getting us tons of money. And then the SRB cuts out, and I fire the next engine, and fall over, and fall apart. very successful mission. I decide not to revert because that's just boring. I'm going to try and avoid reverting unless the damage is absolutely crippling to the program, like I suddenly have no money because the launch failed and it was all my money. Then I'm going to revert. If it kills one of my few pilots, I'm gonna revert. But otherwise, I'm gonna just not revert. It's just better, more quality. And so I'm just gonna let it drop for a while. I'm gonna open the parachute. Jebediah will survive this one. And for the first few flights, I'm actually going to keep using Jebediah. At the time, I completely forgot, because again, I always forget something in setting up my spacecraft. So for a while, I just completely forgot to change pilots. Of course, with the get into space, with the level of technology we have at this point in the game, I wouldn't make it without a pilot. So my only choices would be Jebediah and Valentina. So, you know, Bill and Bob won't get much training for a while. And yeah, there's all the parts crashing into the ground. So we come back to the VAB, and I decide to try and fix it. First thing I thought was that raising these fins would help because it would provide stability in the upper stages, completely forgetting that I'd have no stability in the lower stages. But I set a thrust limiter at about exactly 50% actually, and you know, I'm fairly confident all of a sudden that this is going to work. After, of course, I put on the mystery goo, which I forgot about last time. See? Always forgetting something. And I have it all set up now, and it looks alright, and so I changed the name, because I'm fairly certain that it's going to get to space. And I launch it, and let's just say it doesn't go well. This time, I remember also that with the far aerodynamic model, I need to do my gravity turn earlier, rather than waiting for my SRB to go out. So I try and pull a gravity turn as soon as I can. And I believe in between those two I got General Rocketry, but you couldn't tell because I didn't use any of the parts from General Rocketry, so that's great. And so I reach about 50 meters per second, not kilometers, that would be ridiculous. I reach about 50 meters per second and tilt over just slightly, about 5 degrees to the west. And it works while the SRB is firing because it has the thrust to keep it going straight, and it's a good engine. But when I switch to the LVT-30, eventually, it doesn't exactly go as smoothly. Luckily, this time I have the mystery goo, so I can get a decent amount of science even if this fails. But it didn't go well when it started oscillating back and forth with the SRB on. And then it holds steady for a bit and then just flips over. Somehow fly horizontally without it falling apart. And then I think I have it up straight. And this is where I tried cutting off and around here I tried cutting off the engine. Turns out the engine was already detached from the spacecraft, so I had no control over it. So I started shaking the command module trying to break it off. Another failed launch. Yeah, that was my fault for making a stupid design. Of course, I remembered that I didn't have stability research yet. And that was probably costing me because I was using those tiny fins that are really, really bad. So I was bound to not make it into space with what I had at the time. So I just sort of went and landed with this one. It was an alright mission overall, but the main advantage of it was getting the mystery goo science. Otherwise, it was pretty worthless. Of course, Jebediah is still flying this one because I completely forgot that I should have launched Valentina and gotten more experience. But lessons learned for next time. And there we go. The last piece is crashing into the surface. Right now. So yeah, just going down for the landing fairly slowly. I'm sure it's fine. So, the end goal of this, as I said, is to colonize every system. By colonize every system, I mean have a base on at least a moon. Notably in gas giants, I want to have a base on a moon, but I need to have a surface base in each planetary system. So, for example, in the Joule system, I might have a base on Lathe. In the long run, I might end up extending that, so I'd set up a base on every solid body. So, land something on Gillian, something on Eve, something on Duna, something on Ike, rather than just being like, oh, I could go to Gilly instead of Eve, because I want to get my people off, something like that. Of course, with all this life support stuff, I wouldn't need that. So here I decide that I want to get stability, because I want to get the larger fins. Unfortunately, at this point, I don't have enough science to unlock stability. So I just sort of look at survivability and decide not to, and instead I go in and I design a spacecraft specifically to get the mystery goo off of the launch pad. But I do that, I cut out that, and I got the stability research. And now I attempt to design another spacecraft that will make it to orbit. This time I use the larger fuel tank and the gimbling engine, thinking that that'll help. And, well, sort of it did, except that the real error will be after, well, with this engine too. So I put on the engine, apply a thrust limiter, that works fine. Everything there with the thrust and everything works great. And then I decide to do something really stupid with the aerodynamics, and I put the large wings on the upper section. I don't have the actually useful fins yet, and so I've just made a really top-heavy rocket, thinking, oh, I need a lot of stability, and I completely forget that it's making it top-heavy as well. So, this launch doesn't go well either. In a different way, if I remember correctly. It launches alright, and then it doesn't make it to orbit at all. It starts tilting. I think that was my gravity turn, actually. And then it flies out of control, flips upside down. I'm doing all I can to keep myself alive, but I can't flip myself back over, so I tilt it over, and I don't know why I didn't separate the SR... There we go, separated everything trying to get the parachute, crashed into the surface. Now that's one of my 4 astronauts at the beginning, so I'm actually going to reset, because I am not going to work without Jeb, because he'd have to respawn and everything, and I'm not going to deal with that. That's too much at the very beginning to deal with. So I'll just revert. And, you know, I figured out the error. The winglets were a bit too high. Of course, I did that after deciding to switch out for Valentina, because apparently it'd be better to kill Valentina than Jebediah. Yeah, that's questionable. Then I realized, yeah, the fins are the problem, so I moved the fins down lower, and here they actually provide stability. But in addition to having the gimbling engine for stability on the upper stage, I decided to put on the basic fins. They're smaller, don't make it top heavy, but they provide some sort of control. Not controlled, like keeping it from spinning or toppling out of control. It allows me to keep it focused on one direction rather than spinning away and dying again. And so this launch goes very smoothly. I have, of course, mystery goo modules and crew reports and not much else. I didn't put a science junior on here because I just needed to get into space. When we actually do the orbit launch, I will deal with that then. I will get science juniors on it. We also have universal storage on this. I also have the universal storage, and that will be used extensively. I use that to store all the science experiments in a compact system to carry all my life support, probably. Life support processing will mostly be done by the default TAC life support stuff, although I might mess around with the USI life support, or not the USI, the universal storage recycling systems, because they're more complex and I like how they work more so than pumping carbon dioxide and electricity, make oxygen and waste or whatever. It feels better to actually have to go through a process of applying electricity to break down water into hydrogen and oxygen or something like that. It feels better, in my opinion. But yeah, otherwise I will probably use TAC life support. Later on, of course, our bases will not run off of universal storage recycling. They're going to run off of OKS, Orbital Colonization System. I haven't gotten used to the new changes, so I'll be a bit bad with it. And I'll be honest, I've never landed a surface base before, so I'm sure this series will go well. But here we have enough altitude on our apoapsis to reach space and get the contract that we've been working to get. I grabbed the mystery goo from the upper atmosphere, and I believe I already got another mystery goo, and I decided not to take the one in space. And in another few seconds, we'll be in space. We won't go to orbit. This definitely does not have the ability to go to orbit. So we're just gonna sort of get up into space and get the contract, and then just come down safely. And there we go, contract unlocked, as the space music comes on. And that gives us a good influx of money. The next contract will be to get into orbit, and we'll design a craft specifically to get into orbit. I will use KW rocketry parts a lot for that, because I prefer the KW sets. But later on, we may use some more stock stuff, or, of course, the near future tech stuff. I do like the near future pods, so expect those to be used a lot. And here I try something silly, as if I didn't take enough risks already. I decide to try and take the engine and fuel tank back with me. I have Deadly Reentry installed. If I were playing stock, if I were playing without Deadly Reentry, with stock reentry heating, I'd be able to do this just fine. But yeah, I got rid of it because I realized I was going to flip over and it wasn't worth the risk. So I just sort of dropped down. Of course, real shoots is pretty nasty with parachutes, so I turn on the FAR thing to check my Mach speed, because if you're above Mach 1, the parachutes will just be destroyed. It's very annoying, so I let it drop a ways down and then just deploy the parachute and come down to the surface. So then this mission is landed, and so we succeeded with relative ease. I decided to get a bit of ocean science, because every bit of science helps. I can get more things in the next tech nodes and get all that done. And so I decided to take an EVA report, take out the crew report, clicking the wrong button first, take out the crew report, get back in, do a crew report. And then I decided to take science while in the water, rather than flying above the water. And that goes fine, I get the science, and then I decide to try and get back in the capsule. It doesn't exactly go well. I keep trying to get in by jumping onto those little side things. I've got better buoyancy on, so that's part of why this isn't working. And I eventually try jumping into it, and Valentina proceeds to hit her head or something, pass out, and sink into the depths. So yes, Valentina is just sort of sinking into the bottom of the ocean. I can't control her, so I can't pull myself back up. Probably sinking because of better buoyancy. But we won't have to mount a rescue mission. I managed to get her out using the tracking station. Next time we'll be going to orbit, designing a spacecraft for that, and taking care of that, getting more contracts, but that'll be in the next episode. Until then, goodbye.